My fingers and everything else. All right, let's see. And you guys could all see me? Can you see the image? Okay.
Yes.
I'm because Chrissy, I'm the only one on here. It should be just fine. You guys should be able to see it's but thank you for doing that. I got this really fancy, super adorable, teeny tiny camera that it's on a built-in gimbal. And then it has an attachment you put it to your phone and all of this stuff. But it's been a crazy busy week, so I haven't had a chance to test it out. But I will get that going so we could use it next week. And I'll give everybody a minute. Look at how beautiful it is today. It was kind of overcast until about an hour ago. But now it is, look at it, it's beautiful. About an hour before sunsets. It's a little chilly. It's in like the low 50, I think, high 40s. And I am, of course, at Palais Royal. So I set it so that everybody could just get in without me having to let you guys in. So hopefully that helps a little bit since it doesn't show me. So there's a little alarm going on over here. So, just in time. So we are at the Palais Royal, and today is, because we are 2 days away from Valentine's Day, I thought I'd share some little love stories from Paris. My own, of course, of being in love with Paris and happily being back here. Look at that big boy. But I wanted to share some specific stories that I really like. So we will start right here. We are in the very far corner of the Palais Royal, on the northern corner. And this restaurant right here is the Grand Vefour. And I have talked about this and written about this a few times, but I really love this restaurant. I came here on my very first trip to Paris. And I did it. Back then, it was a special menu. And so it was a special lunch menu and a dinner menu. And it was a multi-course dinner, and that's all you got. But because of COVID, and, when France, they wouldn't let you eat inside, they revamped things. So they set up tables out here, and they also set up tables just right over, right there at the edge of the garden. And they did a different menu, and they still have that menu today, which is more like an a la carte regular restaurant menu. But if you're going to come here, you got to do the whole thing because it's absolutely amazing. The cheese cart at the end alone will just about make you die. It was the most amazing experience. But what's really cool about this is the history of this place. So this is actually one of the oldest restaurants in Paris. There's quite a few of them that claim to be, like the Tour d'Argent or the La Pricope, but neither one of those are. The Grand Vefour is actually one of the oldest. And I'll peek you in. This is where I sat right here. See, look at how gorgeous it is. The ceiling is all painted. Go upstairs and go to the restroom. But they're all around the edges are these red banquettes, leather or velvet banquettes. And I sat in the seat right there, right below the window. And that is where Colette sat. So all of these tables are named after different people. This table right here is Napoleon and Josephine. And that's kind of the little story I wanted to share, because here at the Palais Royal, it has held a few special moments. Look at it, it's really beautiful. Oh, and also Midnight in Paris, the very first scene that they're eating dinner in, when they get together, they meet here. But, it's a great place to come if you don't want to spend, for 2 people with wine, it was about 400 euros. So my grandmother had given me a little special little treat. So when I first came to Paris, and I thought I want to use it on something specific. So that is what I did. So I'm really glad I have that memory of that with her. Obviously she wasn't here. I wish she would have been in here with me, but it was just a really, really special moment. But the Palais Royal itself was where Napoleon decided to come when he was just a 17-year-old in 1787. He came here to the Palais Royal because at that time, it was kind of where you wanted to do anything bad, you came here to the Palais Royal, because it was originally built by a Cardinal Richelieu, so he could be nice and close to Louis XIII at the Louvre. And then it ended up coming to Louis XIV, and his brother had it for a while, and then his son had it. So Philippe Égalité is the one who came here. And then because it is considered a royal palace, the police couldn't come onto the property. So they started setting up gambling and prostitution, and they were having a good old time, having a whole party out here in these beautiful arcades and all of those apartments that now are millions and millions of dollars. But so the brothels and the prostitutes were here, and Napoleon was walking through and met a young lady, a prostitute, and she took his virginity from him. So he had to do it sometime, I guess. Look at how beautiful this all is. But then over here at the Grand Four, at that seat where Napoleon Josephine sat, where the little brass plaques are for their names, on January in 1796, that is where Napoleon proposed to Josephine. And I don't know about you, but if I was married to marry a guy and he maybe he hopefully didn't tell her about this fact, but I don't think I'd want to know that you just proposed to me in the same place that you lost your virginity. I just don't think that's I think that might taint the moment a little bit, but I'm sure it was still wonderful. And that was the great love story of his life. He, of course, as you know, had to divorce her. She was 4.5 years older than he was, and she already had 2 children, and she wasn't getting pregnant. And as we all know, that's really the only role of a woman when they were married to a king or an emperor or anybody in the court life. They had to be there to give a child to, especially an heir, a male son. And she couldn't have any children. And so she kept saying all the time that she was on her period and that was why. But finally he figured that out. And he ended up having to marry Mary Louise, who was the cousin of Marie Antoinette from Austria. And the cousin wasn't too happy about it because she, the French people killed her cousin. She didn't really want to come over here and be in this country. But on his dying bed, his last breath, the last word he said was Josephine. So I think that really was the great love of his life. So here in this little corner, the Palais Royal, I already mentioned her because I sat in her seat, Colette. Colette also lived here. Colette, the great artist or writer that everybody should know about. She wrote the fantastic books, Claudine in Paris, Claudine at School. Claudine at School was the first one. There's a little plaque for her. So she lived right above here. She first moved here early on after she had already divorced Willie, her first husband, who, would take the Claudine books and publish them under his name. He'd lock her in her room until she finished writing because she didn't like doing it because, of course, he forced her to do it. And she moved here for a little bit. Then she always wanted to return to the Palais Royal. So one day she had gotten a message from the current owners of her old apartment, and so they wanted to sell it. And so she said, yes, I will take it. So she moved back here. She was here till the end of her life. But she ended up marrying her third husband. Her second husband that she married, she ended up later having a 5-year affair with his son. I just love these stories from back then. She ended up marrying her third husband, Maurice Gauthier, and he was a journalist and he owned a newspaper. And they were together since 1925. 1935, they had to get married because they were going to go to New York and go on the Normandy, and they weren't allowed to share a cabin unless they were married. So they ended up getting married on the boat, which she was fine never getting married again, but they had to get married. And then in 1941, when the war started, because Maurice was Jewish, he ended up getting arrested and taken by the Gestapo. She used her influence, and one of the high-ranking German officers' wife was a big fan of Colette, so she used that to her advantage. She was able to get Maurice out, and for the rest of the war, for over 3 years, he would sleep up here in the rafters in the attic of the Palais Royal, which, if you're going to sleep in an attic, I think this is the one to sleep in. Look at how beautiful this light is today. But they were married. She died before he did. He lived for quite a few more years. but she died right here. And when she loved the Grand Vefour, she loved to go down there and drink champagne. And so when she started, she had really bad arthritis, and it got really difficult for her to even walk. So when she was older, the staff at the Grand Vefour would come upstairs here, and they'd pick her up in her chair, pick it up on all four legs, and just carry her down to the restaurant, put her in that seat. And when I got to sit in, I was so excited that day. I was like, oh, I really wanted to sit in the Josephine seat. And I walked in and I was like, oh, where are they going to put me? And then they gave me the Colette seat. And I thought, oh, how perfect. Because she wrote Claudine. And when I was little, I didn't like my name because it was so different. It was only a brief period. I think I was like 6 years old. But I didn't like it because it's so different. And I couldn't find a little license plate with my name on it. And everybody else, my sister, her name's Jennifer, couldn't be more normal. And she got to have all the things that had her name on it. Claudine, never possible. And so my grandpa would call me my middle name, Sarah, because I didn't like it. He called me that for many, many years, even after the point where I decided Claudine was okay. Oh, look at signs of spring. It's supposed to be in the 50s this week, so it's definitely warming up. There's a little rose hip there. Look at those sweet little daffodils. I do, you know what I'm really going to miss in the Northwest? You always had the very first sign of spring was when you smelled Daphne. And the smell of Daphne is one of my favorite smells in the entire world. And they don't have that here. So that's going to be, that'll be kind of sad. If it's a lance. Oh, and there's some little purple flowers. So it's actually pretty busy out today, even though it's a February day. There's a lot of people coming to Paris. It's a busy week. So I think maybe because it's also a holiday, isn't it? Next week, or is it next week's President's Day in the US? So I think people have maybe longer vacations. Okay. But we're gonna walk from the right bank to the left bank. And there was lots of music happening a few places along my way when I walked over. It is still a bit chilly. The whole Palais Royal itself, what the Cardinal had, René Richelieu, who was the arch nemesis of Marie de Medici. Pretty much all that remains of that is this very corner up here. I'll show you. I had a gal in Paris message me the other day. She's really sweet. She's called the Petite Guide. She does a lot of tours for families with little kids of Paris. She's absolutely wonderful. She's originally from Texas. So she messaged me the other day and said that her daughter, who's 6, at French school, they were studying all about Marie de Medici, and they took the class to the Louvre last week to see the Rubens cycle. And I was like, oh, I couldn't love that more. So she said she wanted to learn more about it. So I sent her the podcast episode. She goes, oh, good. Now I could talk more about this with my daughter. But how much do you love that school takes you to the Louvre as 6 years old to talk about Marie de Medici? So great. So here, this side here, that is the Culture, Ministry of Culture. 3 government buildings in here. This is one of those places you go through on that weekend in September. So this back corner is really all that's left of the Palais Cardinal, is what it was called, back here in this back corner. We have the Buren columns. So these are added in 2000. And of course, everybody hated them because anything that's contemporary, they hate. But you could tell that's not the case, even though most of these people are going to be tourists. But everybody still loves them now. This artist does everything with these awning stripes. And so if you go to the Museum of Modern Art over in the 16th, you could see down where they have Matisse's, his sketch of the dance. It's in the that's in Philadelphia. The original's in Philadelphia. This was a sketch. This was his early design. There's a whole room of these huge canvases in different shapes with all these awning stripes. And as soon as I saw it, I was like, oh, this looks like the columns. So you can, there's a plaque there. We walk through here. There's a little, I don't know if it was TikTok dancing or what they were doing. Here we have, we could follow. We should do a walk someday when I just follow that whole line from north to south. I don't know. I think it would take more than an hour. But it goes through here. And you know, my favorite one's over here under this table. There's Xavier. It's over here under the table is my favorite spot. They're very busy as always, except for this one.
Show me a share.
Bonjour. And we'll walk. You know, I couldn't do anything about love in Paris without including my true love. They covered this building here in these mirrors, which is really cool. They did this a couple months ago, but it's pretty cool from certain angles where you stand. Like right here, get right past the sign. Look at that. Isn't that cool? And then they are redoing this. This was a magasin, the Louvre Magasin. It was a huge department store. And they are redoing all of it. They're cleaning it all out. And they're redoing the whole entire inside structure. They've been working on this for months. And it's going to become stores again. There was one holdout. My friend Camille, her father had his art gallery there forever, but there was this one woman that still was the only business in there, and it was a gallery. She refused to leave, even though nobody would go in there because everybody just thought it was closed. But she finally got out for them. I think they gave her a special deal for her to move back in. New, the special exhibit about Naples coming up. I don't think I'd call June soon, but this Uzbekistan one that's on right now is pretty cool. It's small. I went to go see it the other day. We're just getting and the Louvre, of course. We did a podcast episode. I don't think it was last. I think it was 2 years ago, Valentine's Day, that I did love in the Louvre, and I did a bunch of stories of paintings and pieces of art that had to do with love. And of course, one of the greatest stories, Cupid and Psyche, that's in there. I will put a link on the website if you want to listen to that one and even see all of the pieces of art. You could basically follow their entire story through art. Let's take you back here real quick. Let's see. The Corbusier, my favorite. It's busy in there. But Psyche and Cupid. There's, of course, Psyche revived by a kiss, one of the most famous sculptures that always gets everybody stopped inside. We might be, we're half an hour from sunset. But there was an when she lived in Paris, she was married, this little affair with Morton Fullerton. He was a journalist, and she would text them the old-fashioned way by sending him letters in the mail. Back then, though, the mail delivered like 2 or 3 times a day. There's stories of Hemingway and Hadley when they were courting that they would get letters from each other 2 or 3 times a day. So, I mean, now you're lucky if you get the U.S. Post Office shows up once a day. But, but Edith Wharton used to send him letters and say, I'll meet you in the shadows of Diana at 1 o'clock. And then they'd come here and meet in the corner where the Diane Bennett is, of gorgeous statue by Jean Goujon, the monument that he made for a fountain to go on her property, the Chateau d'Annette. She was, of course, the great love of Henry II. We'll see something else about them in a minute. Look at that light. So beautiful. But where the Chateau or the Diane d'Annette is, it is kind of hidden back. So it is kind of a perfect place for the tete-a-tete. Such a lovely evening. It's been sunny and beautiful just about every day this week. And it's surprisingly busy for February. I went to Versailles the other morning to see the fantastic exhibit of Louis XV before it closed. And I was surprised just how busy it actually was. A cute little guy. A little guy with like little glasses, like they're so cute. So I mentioned Henry II and Diana. We see Henry II, of course, is married to Catherine de Medici. You see her name up there because it kind of has the 4 dates of the Louvre. So 1541 was when Francois I started this part of the Louvre. This is the oldest part of the above ground. Then in 1564, Catherine the Snake. She was not a nice woman. Catherine de Medici built the Tuileries. And then you see up there, 1852 is when Napoleon III started his. But Catherine, as I said, was married to Henry II, who was the son of Francois Premier. So, but Henry II met Diane Poitiers when he was very young. She was older than him. She was actually one of the governess of the little kids of Francois. And when Francois Premier was sent off to Spain to go to prison, and then later made a deal that with Charles V, that of England, that he would be released, in turn giving his 2 oldest sons. So Henry II and Francois were sent in his place to Spain, and they were children, which is just, a lovely a lovely thought of a lovely parenting moment there. But so when Henry II left, Diane de Poitiers gave him a kiss goodbye, and from that moment on, he was in love with her. But their love story, and so Catherine later goes and builds the Tuileries after Henry II is killed, and then she tries to rewrite the whole love story of her and Henry II, which all is a bunch of hooey because he actually truly loved Diane. So this is a big thing that has historians none of them could agree, but I have solved it. I've even talked to my friend Jacques about it, who is one of the best tour guides in the world, who gives the tours to basically heads of state and famous people of the Louvre. And I pointed this out, and it has to do with that statue of Diane, because see up there, the cipher of the H. So that's for Henry II. So we do know his wife was Catherine, but his mistress and love was Diane. So people say it's two D's or it's two C's. Sometimes people say maybe it's both. Maybe it's a D and a C. I think it's a D, and here's why. Because, well, that was his love. But on that statue of Diane, I'm going to go inside tomorrow and make a video inside the Louvre of it. And I have posted about it before. But on that monument that Diane had commissioned to Jean Goujon for her property, it has that symbol on it. And if I was Diane, I would not be putting some emblem on my statue for my property of my lover and his wife. So I think it's Diane. And when I told my friend Jacques, he was like, you know, I have to agree. I think you're right. So many historians disagree, but I've just solved it for them. But a lot of people say it's Catherine, but you know, it could be both. It could be a C and a D, or maybe he did it on purpose. And so he could be like, you know, if Catherine gets mad, he could just say, baby, it's for you. And then Diane, he just says, no, baby, it's your name. I think he had it covered either way he did it. But the back of the Louvre here, the H below it is also for Henry II. So you have all different emblems on here. I always look down when I walk because these cobblestones are frightening. Some of them stick up very high. But you have ones over here. That K is actually for Charles. So Charles IX, who was another son of Henry II and Catherine. And then you have all of these statues that go all the way around. So this whole backside, so the original part that Francois Premier did is you have the middle there, the Pavillon Sully, the Pavillon d'Horloge, and it goes back over to this side. So this is the original part of the above ground, what I call the contemporary 16th century Louvre. Below us, right where we are, is where the medieval remains are. It doesn't go all the way out to the square. I've seen some people say that this traces it, but it doesn't actually. It actually comes in a little bit more because it did actually sit on top of what the Sully wing is now. That is supposed to kind of be the middle, but it's actually a little bit more on the edge of it. So the original medieval Louvre, it goes back to the 12th century, 1126, sat here, right here, back here. If you go down below, you go down there, see the medieval parts that they found in the 80s. Henry II then added the second part over there that mirrored this part. And then they came over here, did this. Then they started going the other direction. When Catherine built the Tuileries at the very far end, which nothing remains now except for the Pavillon de Flore and the Pavillon Marsan, which is the very far end of the building of the Palais de Louvre, they ended up starting to build the Grand Gallery. So that connected to the Tuileries. So the Tuileries was there before the Grand Gallery, and they just built that. Henry IV was building that to connect the two. And then this whole side back here, this was all added on by Louis XIV, but then he up and left and went to Versailles. And for about 160 years, it sat here without a roof until Napoleon Bonaparte came and put that on. But when Louis XIV left, he let all artists come in here and move. And so there was tons of ateliers, and they were living here. There was fires, like little tiny pot stove fireplaces in here, and they set up their ateliers. They let the ministries move in here. So all of the, or the academies, so the Academy of Science and Arts and Letters and all of that stuff, that is now across the street, across the Seine, at the Institut de France. Over here. Oh, I was wondering how We did on time. I get so long-winded when it comes to the Louvre. We could have just stayed back in the back courtyard for an hour and a half. You can see, kind of busy. Look at this. So they're working on all of this. This is the Jardin d'Enfants. That it's basically nothing has been in there for as long as I can remember, but they're working on this, and they're also working on the summer apartments of Anne of Austria, which is what had the Roman statuaries in it. And it's gonna take like 4 years. I was not happy when I heard that one. That one's been all done. I've never seen that garden done. And they've been working on all of these rooms, the Gallery Campana on the first floor up here. That was supposed to be open in November, and it's not. So I posted a picture about the Gainsbourg, the Maison Gainsbourg, that was supposed to open last spring. It's almost spring. It doesn't look like anything's happening. So as a rule of thumb, whenever you read anything that says when it's going to open in Paris, just add about a year or two, because it never opens on time. Oh, isn't that pretty? So you can see how lovely. Oh, I don't, the people that say they love that smell of those chestnuts, I wonder if you have a sense of smell, because they smell like nothing but a big burning wet dog. It's so gross. Lovely. Look, I'll take you on the side here. Oh, here we have the bracelet scammers. Sometimes they come down from Montmartre. The other morning, there was they're always on this bridge. The gals, the Romanian gals with their pretend clipboards. And a friend of mine that always posts pictures every day from here took a picture of the sheet after they threw it down because the police were coming. And on it, they write how much are given a donation. And it says where the people are from. So it says tons of people from the USA. That's like, England, Italy, stuff. And people are giving at least $20 because they tell them it's for the deaf. And sometimes they pretend that they're deaf. And I've had people say, oh, I felt bad because they were deaf. And I added it up just from the picture, and it was over 400 euros. And it's a scam. So it's a really good rule of thumb that if somebody has an accent and asks you, do you speak English? Don't acknowledge that you even understand what they're saying. Don't make eye contact and just go. Just keep going, because they're not going to, it's just going to be trouble. If they have an accent and they ask you, do you speak English? What could they really want? And also, if they're collecting signatures or something, as you know, in the US, those signatures need to be citizens. So what would they be needing your signature as a tourist? So they now know to stay away from me. I think they've recognized me and they don't come near me, but I also don't make contact with them. And one day I yelled at them, and then they said a bunch of things, which I'm pretty sure they were swear words in Romanian. And they were not very happy with me, because I've warned people at times too. I've seen them more than a few times actually pickpocketing people, and I've stopped and alerted the people and scared them off. They don't like it. You can see down there, you can see the tops of the Tower of Notre Dame. And of course, the Institut de France, when I was walking home the other day, they were just finishing up a ceremony of an induction into one of the academies. So the Institut de France was the College of Four Nations, and it was built with the money from Cardinal Mazarin after he died. And he left that money so they could build this college. So it was a college called the College of Four Nations. And it was 22 students from 4 nations, and that's it. Pretty nice digs, huh? And then later, after Napoleon, look at that, look at my beauty. When Napoleon kicked all the artists out of the Louvre, they ended up coming over here. So this is where the academies went. And I think there's 6 of them. And so it's Academy of Letters, Science. This is where they also govern the French language. So we could thank them for all of the frustration. But now up there is the Bibliothèque Mazarin. It's one of the largest and oldest collections of books because it is a collection of Mazarin. And you can actually go in there anytime. You have to show your ID, you have to get a pass, you could do everything. But you could even get a pass for 15, I think it's 15 euros. And it's good for a whole year and you could use it. You do, you can't just go into like any other American library. There's certain things you can't touch. If there's things you're looking for, you have to ask them to look it up for you. You can't have obviously any liquids, but there's, you could plug in your computer. I actually come down here and work because it's so close to where I live. And if I want a little change of scenery, it's a great place to come. But I love this building and I always have to see it. But I asked a Frenchman one time why the French language was so hard. And he said that the people that are in charge of it were bored and they just tried to make it more difficult. So recently, it's a big anniversary of the Tête de Colette, and they have this little bookstore here, which I have to walk through all the time. And so they get me, you need to see, I think I need that book. And there's Colette, that's her hanging out of her apartment at the Palais Royal where we just were. You see her there. Look at La Maison de Claudine. I have quite a few versions. My grandma actually, when I was little, gave me the complete collection of the Claudine books. It was a pretty thick book, and it's all 4 of the Claudine books. You got some Marie Curie. A lot of times they have the books about the different people that are part of the academies, and those seats are called the Immortals. So once you're in there till your death. And it's really cool. You could actually find online, I think I saw it on French Wikipedia, you could actually find a seat, just pick a number, it'd be like seat 12 for the painters and sculptors who's held that seat. And you could do the letters, so like Victor Hugo, and science, Marie Curie, of course, but it's really interesting. Okay, so I have some sad news here. If you watch every fall, when we have Ivy Watch, it's on this building. And this is the building that they used in Julie and Julia. When Julia Child and Paul arrived in France, they come around this corner. You see the Librairie des Arts in the movie, and they pull up to this building, they get out. But guess what? I don't think we're gonna have Ivy Watch anymore because there's no more ivy. And it looks like they painted it. So I was kind of sad. So we have to, maybe each year I'll just post the last few years of Ivy Watch because it's the beautiful red. It turns out beautiful red. I love it. So hopefully maybe they put it back on, even though it's supposed to be really bad for the buildings. So we are on Rue de Seine. And a couple weeks ago, I posted, it was on the 24th and the 26th of January. 24th, I posted the story of Modigliani, because that is the day anniversary that he died in 1920. And 2 days later, his love of his life, Jean, also died. So she couldn't take it anymore. She was pregnant. She was 9 months pregnant. She couldn't imagine a life without him. And so she jumped from the window, killed herself. But the reason I'm showing you this right here is number 12. Her brother was actually an artist himself. And just back 20 years ago, in 2002, they were going through the basement here, and he had an atelier in this building at number 12. And in the basement, they found 6 of her paintings. She was an artist as well. That's how she met Modigliani. He was at an art school up in Montparnasse. They ended up actually living right next to the art school. And after she died, that's actually where they took her body, because she jumped from her parents' window. Her parents were mortified. They really hated the fact she was in with Modigliani, just because they thought he was horrible and poor, and her parents, like, her body was on the ground. She jumped from a 5th floor window. Body was on the ground, and her parents just basically looked out the window and then, closed the door. And I'm sure they were, very upset. But they ended up contacting some of the people from the art school and telling them to come get her. And they literally picked her up in a cart, took her back to the art school. And that's where she stayed until an ambulance came, but she died instantly. She was 9 months pregnant. It was such a sad story. For the Rue des Beaux-Arts there, the Beaux-Arts school, and where l'hotel is, where Oscar Wilde died. So this is all the artist history down in this area, because it is so close to the art school. And we have the Palette there, of course. And right here at 31 is where Georges Sand lived. And Georges Sand, of course, we did a podcast episode about her as well. This is where she lived. This is where she lived when she was in her relationship with Alfred de Musset, which he was a poet. And forever, when I did the research for her, the podcast about Georges Sand, everything I was finding made it sound like he was kind of this wussy guy. Like, he definitely had some, he would kind of have like some manic issues where he would kind of just freak out and kind of basically, become immobile. He couldn't do anything. And they were in Italy, and it happened in Italy. So she ended up calling a doctor, and then the doctor came, and then she ended up starting to have an affair with the doctor, and then left Alfred there. And they came back, and then the two of them would be like, get together, then break up, and then get back together. But then when I was doing research about him for something else, I learned like he was amazing. He was like this poet, and he wrote songs, and just a really interesting, amazing guy. So George Sand was she had a lot of relationships. She was also involved with Chopin. They were actually friends after they were lovers. They were friends for a long time, and she helped try to take care of him, but she also was kind of horrible to him. But she was she was married because, but it was basically one of those forced things. She, from her grandmother's side, had in a lot of money. She inherited, and this guy that she married basically fooled her into thinking he had something, and then basically was just trying to like eat up all of her money. And then he would sleep with everything that walked, every one of the women that worked in their house he was sleeping with and getting them pregnant. And then Georges finally said, I'm sick of this, I'm out of here. Paid to Paris. And then she was trying to publish, and that's when she changed her name to Georges Sand, because she couldn't publish as her name. But she is one of the very first women to ever be able to make a living wage from her writing. La Palette here. They back on April 1st, the first day, you were not allowed to use the heaters outside. And funny thing was, the week before April 1st, this last year, it was in the 70s, and everybody's wearing t-shirts. And by the end of March, it was freezing cold. And on April 1st, that entire day was freezing cold and snowing. So it wasn't the best day for it to be the first day without heaters. And it's definitely very different now because there are no heaters. And I think it's definitely affecting businesses because, your seating. I used to sit outside even when it was cold out all the time. And now The other day I went to go grab a place for lunch, and near places are really dwindled down because it was too cold to sit outside. So I would have said, right here at 52, this is the back door of the club that Jim Morrison went on the last night he was alive. And some people think he actually did die in there on the toilet, and then they picked him up and moved him back over to the Murray to his apartment. But look at how I love this building. I love those windows there. I want to live in that one. So actually, let's go down this way. Take you through that. Take you to see my other love. I always love this little street too. And then you can see, look at the very top at the end. Can you see that? Says you please. Thank you guys all for joining today. I'm glad that it's not too bad out. It's definitely chilly, but the other morning it was like 24 degrees. That was a little on the nippy side. Here's where I get my favorite shoes. Those are cute. I haven't seen those ones. This is where I got my Reef Ghost. They're finally not in the window for the first time in like 4 years. But look at it. Fellow Tour de France fans. I think I need that. But I have very little. Oh, look at that. I have that little round necklace with a leopard, but look at that big one. I already have run out of space for books. They're not stacked on the floor, but I'm super excited because tomorrow I get my desk is getting delivered. So this, you guys all know what this is. This is a Rue de Furstenberg. Funny thing, everybody calls it the Place de Furstenberg, but it's actually not named that. It's just the Rue de Furstenberg, named after the cardinal. But look at this lovely night. And there, a lot of times you see things filmed in here. And Edith Wharton's book, if you've seen this, if not, go look it up and watch it now. But Edith Wharton wrote The Age of Innocence in 1920, and they filmed the very last scene here with Daniel Day-Lewis. That was right there in the middle. What's that fantastic, iconic lamppost? But you know who's right there. This is where Delacroix lived at the end of his life. Right there, and this is the Musée National Delacroix. There's a new exhibit opening. They need to change the sign. It opens this week. So it's a small museum. So it's one of those that's kind of a exhibition center because it's so small that you can't really change things out without closing it. This is a great building, even though that's faux brick. Spoiler alert. Okay. So to the right, you go down to, oh, back up for you. You see it up there? Saint-Germain-des-Prés. This area is all interior decorators. So every year in January, they do the deco off. And just last month, they had it where they had all the huge lampshades hanging around the streets in this area. Because this whole area is either interior or art galleries and the art school. So the left bank is the thinkers. You're either a right banker or you're a left banker. I'm a left banker. Even though the Rue's on the right. The Passage de la Petite Boucherie. Another cute little street. I always love to come down the little side streets like this because they're nice and quiet and there's nobody. And sometimes you find cool little things. Look at that. Oh, that's not PG-13. Oh, look at this. It's like, look, it's like a Benihana. Jenny, are you watching? Maybe we need to come here. There's quite a few Asian restaurants in this area now. It was funny, there was just the ramen place on Rue Mazarine, and I stayed over it twice, like in 2018, I think it was. And oh boy, there's always a line. There's a line for lunch and a line for dinner. Then across the street is the, what is it, the Experimental Cocktail Club. Oh boy, the nights were not easy to sleep. But I think the ramen place was so popular that a ton of Asian restaurants came in here. So there's sushi and everything. It's really great. But if you really want some really great sushi, you go over to Rue Sainte-Anne. That is kind of where it used to be where all the Asian restaurants were. And there's some really great sushi and it's not very expensive. So we're gonna wind our way up. How are we doing on time? Oh, well, might be a little bit more than an hour as it usually is. Gonna head up and go past Saint-Sulpice. Share two other little love stories with you. You know, it's at the down this street a little bit, not this pharmacy, but 2 blocks down, you have the fantastic City Pharmacy that's flashing green in the distance. City Pharma, the greatest pharmacy in the world. Stop there on my way back to get shampoo and toothpaste because I like the fancy Italian toothpaste, the Marvi that comes in all the different flavors. And I love the licorice, black licorice. And some people cringe when I say that. This is the Marché Saint-Germain, but you also have Uniqlo here, which if you come here and it's cold, you didn't plan on it, go in there, you get the Uniqlo Heat Tech. You live in them. They're the greatest things ever. They're really, really, really lightweight. You get it so it fits close to your skin. And then there's fibers in it that work off of your actual skin and keep you warm. And I've been wearing those the last week and they're fantastic. So this little courtyard, this is a restaurant, Italian restaurant. But this courtyard right here is actually some of the oldest cobblestones on the left bank besides the amphitheater in the Latin Quarter. But this whole area on this side of it was all the Abbey of Saint-Germain-des-Prés. And then right there, you have Saint-Sulpice. So all the way up to here was Saint-Germain-des-Prés, and then Saint-Sulpice started. And as you know, the Catholic Church had an insane amount of money. And so they had these things that were called fairs, but they were like markets. But you could also come here and get clothing and fabrics and anything, house stuff and anything under the sun. And so it used to be right here. Well, these cobblestones down there date back to that time. And we're talking back to like the 10th century. So these are really, really old. This is one of those things like, I'm not a big Italian food person, but I kind of want to go there and just tell everybody to understand. Don't spill your spaghetti sauce on these cobblestones. Let's see the clubs. So that's kind of a cool little thing. There, the sign that's over it, the plaque is about World War II. So they don't even tell you. I mean, they should have like the story on the menu, something. Here's an Apple store if you need to get something fixed, need to get a new phone. This used to be a Marks and Spencer, but with Brexit, they had to close because they couldn't bring stuff in to the country easily anymore. So now it's an Epic, which is Monoprix as well. And here, of course, we have one of my favorites, always busy, de Marseille. Le bon comptoir de Marseille, always busy. So we're gonna head over here. And I think you know what that is. The Église Saint-Sulpice. All these little stores here are gone. There's a lot of movement going on my on the streets I live on, and the streets right around it. There's like a really old shoe store that closed, and now I don't know what's going into it. Another thing on the side that something's now going in, which is exciting because it's been boarded up for years. Look at that. And if we want, I could pop in there for you. We'll see if mass is going on, but we're going to go up here because another love story that I love to tell. And my friend, John Baxter, and if Carrie's watching, Carrie, who lives in England, she was here in Paris in the fall and sent me, and we were sitting at Evu, and all of a sudden around the corner comes my friend John Baxter, and she loves John's books. And I was like, John, and he stopped and said hi, and she was so cute. You would have thought she met the Pope. But I love John's a very good friend of mine, and every time I am with him, I thank the lucky stars, because hanging out with him and us dorking out on history and all these stories is great. But so he's working on a new book. Actually, it's probably coming out sometime this year, but it's about, and I don't know if I'm even supposed to talk about it, but it's about famous French love stories. But he wanted to pick ones that actually weren't ones that everybody knew, even though he has Napoleon and Josephine. But we were together one day, and we're always talking about what he's working on. And he said, can you think of any other ones? And I said, well, you got to do Paul Verlaine and Arthur Rimbaud. And he's like, oh, my dear, perfect. So Arthur Rimbaud was a poet, and so was Paul Verlaine. And Paul Verlaine is both of them are very favorite and famous French poets. Paul Verlaine was born in 1844, and Rimbaud was born 10 years later in 1854. And Paul Verlaine, by 1871, was very established, and everybody really knew who he was. And Arthur Rimbaud was just a young whippersnapper. He wrote this poem called The Drunken Boat. And he sent it to Paul because they had a correspondence going. And Paul said, why don't you should come up to Paris, and there's all these other writers here, and it'd be great for you. So came up to Paris, got off the train, went to Paul's apartment here in Saint-Germain, and he wasn't home. He wasn't home, but his wife Mathilde was. And so they were talking and hanging out, and then Paul came home. And they had a very good friendship. That good friendship between Paul and Arthur turned to love. And they began an intimate relationship. And at that point in time, it was very frowned upon to have a homosexual relationship in France. And so they left and they went to Belgium. And on their way there, Mathilde was like, wait a minute, no, you're not stealing my husband. I'm getting him back. So she'd go after him and take Paul and make him come back home. And he'd come home for a little bit. And then he realized he couldn't be without Arthur. So he'd leave again and go back. And they did this back and forth for 2 years. and they were up in Belgium. And this was after they had been in London as well. And they were in Belgium. And Paul thought, God, I got to get away from this guy. So he got a gun and he tried to shoot Arthur. They shot him in the wrist. But Paul went to jail in 1873. He went to jail for 2 years. And when he got out, he ended up moving up to Rue des Cars, which is up behind the Pantheon, which is also where another gentleman, Ernest Hemingway, in the same building, would rented a teeny tiny apartment on the very top floor that he would use for writing. But Arthur Rimbaud, his home, the Drunken Boat, in very old French. Chrissy, you should come here and I'm sure you could figure this out. But even when you look at this, if you know French, it's a little difficult because it's very, very old French. But he wrote this in 1871. He came here, performed it at the men's circle that was there in the Place Saint-Sulpice, in one of those apartments. And then if you read a couple weeks ago, I sent in my newsletter and also posted on Instagram the story of Henri Fontaine-Latour's painting called The Corner Table. And that is also all of those gentlemen, the poets and the writers gathered. And then you see Arthur Rimbaud and Paul Verlaine in the lower left corner. And Arthur Rimbaud is like, has his head on his, on the back of his hand, just looking longingly at Paul. But it reads backwards. It actually reads from this direction to that direction. And it was added here just about 10 years ago. They really should have, and they did it one time, and it was just on a piece of paper. They really should have like a QR code or something that you could flash and get it, the translation. But it's all about this boat that is tossed by the waves and sinks. But he was inspired by Jules Verne and his 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. So we're going to end up here. Maybe if you want, I can walk you quickly into Saint-Sulpice if you guys want to see that. But we're going to end up here at this building. And I don't know if I've ever done this in my life. Walk. This building here at 6 Rue is the second home that Hemingway, well, third home he lived in Paris. He moved in here on September 24th, 1927 with Pauline Pfeiffer. So he came back after Bambi was born with Hadley, and then they were together for a bit. They went to Spain, and on that trip to Spain, after they were in southern France with Pauline was also there. They were on a train in Spain, and they were there for about a month, then decided on the train back they were going to split up. And when he was with Pauline, they moved here, rich Uncle Gus. And they are, the descendants is the Pfizer Corp. And I was not pleased when I found out that the vaccine I got was Pfizer, because I do not need anything that was Pauline's in my Hemingway blood. But he was very, very wealthy, as you could imagine. And he bought this apartment for them. It was on the top floor. And here you have these sphinxes here. There was a rumor for a long time that Johnny Depp then owned this building, but I don't know. I've never seen him. I really kind of care less. I've never really seen the fascination with that guy, but I've walked by it quite a few times, and the gate has been open, and I like hightail it up here, and then by the time I get here, the gate's closed. So I keep missing. Look, let's see. Let me get hold you guys up. But I think I've seen quite a few cars. See, I don't know. I think there's maybe a few people that live in there. But this is where they lived. They lived here until 1931. Oh, she got pregnant. They ended up moving to Florida, Key West, 1931. And then in 1933, they came and packed everything up, but they never really returned. Or he came every once in a while after 1931, but you have the beautiful, this little building here on the right, that's adorable. And look at that upper little terrace. Was a little like tea cafe for a long time, but I have not seen it open since Oh, but isn't it just adorable? Look it up there. I would love to have that as my little terrace. So I'll take you inside. Swimsuit place real quick. I mean, if I'm this close, I have to show you Delacroix real quick. But I don't know. Usually at this time of the night, mass might be going on. But the sun pretty much setting now too. But we're not in a very good. They've been working on it in March 2019, but 3 weeks before the fire at Notre Dame, some jackass set the south transept door over here on fire, and it's been completely redone. It's really great. I could go in there and show you real quick. But they were also doing some work over here. You can see where they put that netting up there to hold up the stones. I saw somebody recently post a picture, and I've heard other people say that they hate coming here and seeing a building that they love covered with scaffolding. And I do agree. And I always feel bad when it's a building somebody really wants to see. But, they have a law that if it's a historic building, you have to do it. It's like every 11 years. It's a random number. You have to update and clean the facade and make sure everything's well and attached. So if you want to keep nice things, what do you have to do? But that being said, first time I came to Paris in the fall of 2016, one of the top things on my list was to come in here and see this. And then I walked in the door. This whole thing was covered up and I couldn't see inside. And I was not thrilled, but I came back a month later, it was open. But here you have Delacroix, the Chapel of the Angels. It'll be good because I do have a meeting pretty soon with one of the high-ranking church officials to do some stuff for them and with them for social media. So I'm really excited about that. And just the other day, this was still filled. This is where they always put the nativity scene. It usually stays up through February 2nd. And this just 4 days ago was still filled with like all the plywood set up for it, but they've taken it out. But here's the door. It's kind of darkening. Come into the churches during the day and then also later in the evening because of the light. Everything looks different. But so here is the South Transept. They completely rebuilt that whole entire box. They had also the fire had completely burned at that bas relief that's up there. So they replaced all of that. So it was done pretty quickly because they were just putting this stuff up in like September. And then, as we know, things like that don't happen that quickly here in Paris. But so you see, it looks like the other side. It's rather busy in here. I'll walk out that part. They've been slowly also cleaning up each of the chapels. So cleaning up all of, you can see down here the different with, well, you can't see anything there, but some of these chapels are pretty bad, especially on the north side are really bad. But look at this one. Look at how wonderful this one is. This is Saint Geneviève. You've got a relic of Saint Geneviève in here. Real quick. There's a little relic of it. Wonderful Saint Geneviève. And there you have where she is bringing, probably can't see that on light, bringing bread to people. And this one is, you can't see it all, but it is kind of shows a procession of her relics. We did 2 episodes about her life last January. It was fascinating how the procession of her relics were. Look at how nice this one is with that ceiling. This is the chapel of St. Anne, who was the mother of Mary. But that one looks fantastic. The chapel of the Virgin has been completely covered up since late fall. And then this one, this whole side of the church, they're pretty bad. They're pretty bad shape. But they're slowly doing each one. The mayor gave a lot of money to the churches so that they could redo all these things because they all lost so much during COVID because people weren't coming into the church, of course, to buy candles and everything. So I don't know why it's all wet right here. Anyway, so there you go. Here's Rue Saint-Sulpice, the church that leads to the church, the street that leads to the church, which is where all the brothels were that serviced the priests. But so there you go. That's your little Sunday hour, 15 minutes from Paris. But I don't know, look and see. I don't want to turn my thing. If anybody had any questions, I could kind of see them, but I have to read everything sideways. But I'll say hi real quick. Hi, June and Janice. I could see a few faces on here. Hi, all. So, yep, I am back. And also my hair. So one of the things that happened when I was in Houston, which I don't want to turn my head, and I just did. One of the things that happened when I was in Houston, I went to go get my hair done. And I went to this place and she was curling my hair and it got really, really, really hot, like literally burning on my head because she was actually burning my hair off. And so it got really bad. And this whole backside of my head, literally the hair was like a half an inch long, the whole back crown of my head. The only thing that didn't burn off was the front top and the very back. So at first, you know, it didn't look too bad. But then as it was growing out, it got worse. So that was another lovely thing I had to live through in my 3-month exile that I was waiting on everything to get finished. So my friend Byron said, just make sure you only walk straight into places or don't like walk out places backwards. I was like, oh, that's helpful. I think that won't be weird at all. But actually my friends say you can't really even tell. I could tell because it's also my hair grows really fast. And so my brown roots run coming in quickly. But I just want to give it a few more weeks just to make sure it's okay. I went again to another place and the lady was like, I'm not going to do it. She's like, you need to give it some time. She goes, because we don't want it to fall out again. So now I'm terrified, but I'll give it a few more weeks, but hopefully it's not that bad. But all right, guys, I will leave you here. Make sure you check out I'll show you my favorite place again. Make sure you check out tomorrow's new podcast episode, and I'm really excited about it. It's actually going to be a 2-part series. We're starting for about 2 months. We're going to do some really fun true crime stories from Paris. And the first 2 episodes, the 2-part episode, is about Henri Désiré Landru. And if you don't know who he was the French Bluebeard, which Bluebeard, the story was written by a Frenchman anyway, but he was a real Bluebeard, and you just have to listen to it. It was a really fun story to research and to do. So I had a lot of fun doing those. And then after that, we have the next episode are about the poison affairs that kind of rocked the court of Louis XIV. And those stories are pretty fantastic too. So we've got quite a few of them. I got a few other serial killers and some other crime stories after that. But I'm really excited about that. So make sure you check those out. First one will be out tomorrow. And listen to the bells. I could hear all these from my apartment window. So I will say goodnight to everybody. Even though it's morning there on the West Coast. And I hope to see you guys soon. Hopefully you're coming to Paris sometime this year. And if you are, let me know. Let's do a tour. I am, but there's certain times that are booking up pretty quickly. So let me know if you're coming to Paris. It'd be great to give you guys a tour. And yeah, just make sure, listen to the podcast. And then we will do a walk next Sunday. And I'll come up with a fun idea. So thank you guys so much. Thanks so much for tuning in. If you want to leave a tip at all, you can do that at my Venmo or PayPal or at Claudine at ClaudineHemingway.com. Or you can also do it on my Instagram. In my profile, there's a little koji thing and it says, buy me a glass of champagne, I think is what it is. And you can leave me a tip there. So go use it on buying some champagne. So thank you guys so much for joining me. And I will see you all next week.